Hey kids, it's Mr. Fly here, hope you're well. And welcome to Amersham on this absolutely beautiful sunny day, where I'm out and about once again on the Ducati Streetfighter V2, a bike I've been riding for the last couple of weeks. I've been riding the pants off it for you to learn all I can about this bike, and in this video I'm going to bring you all the lessons I've learned about what it's like to live with this machine. So if you're interested in the baby V2 Streetfighter, stick around, stay tuned, this video's for you.
So this being my in-depth review on the bike means that I'm going to take you along on all sorts of roads in all sorts of conditions. I've ridden this at night, I've ridden it in the rain, I've ridden it on faster roads, I've ridden it in the twisties. I'm also going to give you a view of what the bike is like with regards to some practical items, and then I'm going to go through all the pros and cons that I've learnt about the bike since I've been riding it over the last 2 weeks. So without further ado, let's crack on.
So what's the baby Streetfighter like in the urban environment? Well, this is just a little market town, but it's kind of knocking off time, so it's busy as you can see. And it's pretty good in traffic actually, because it's a small lightish bike. You can nip around stuff easy. Thank you, sir. So it's good in that respect, but it is a little bit lumpy bumpy, and although you don't have to feather the clutch as much as you would on, say, my Panigale, and the clutch is a lot lighter as well than on my Panigale, it's not that happy at slow speeds. So yeah, sort of middling in town, I think. There are better commuter bikes, but you could do it on it. If your ride to work is, you know, good moving, fairly fast traffic, no problem. But if you're in traffic, it's not brilliant for that. Well, in the twisties, of course, is where this bike comes alive. I would suggest it's really what it's designed for. And it has to be said, the bike is great around these back roads. It's so light and agile feeling and flickable. It changes direction so quickly. If I had a criticism, it would probably be mostly to do with the UK roads. They're so flipping bumpy here. It means the suspension feels quite harsh, but of course it being adjustable means it could probably be dialed out and made a bit softer for these sort of roads. But as it is, I suspect this is on its factory settings. I find the suspension settings a little bit harsh, and on these bumps I'm finding myself knocked out of the seats a bit. But overall, an absolute joy to ride through the twisties. This quick shifter is brilliant, making it easy to flip up and down the gears, and changing direction is a piece of cake, and with loads of power as well if you want to do a cheeky overtake when you get the chance. Talking of which, yeah, so huge thumbs up for back road riding. Brilliant, the Streetfighter V2 on the twisties. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm not a fan of riding in the wet on any bike really, and in particular these naked bikes are probably my least favourite bikes to ride in the wet, because of course you are exposed to the weather. So I tend not to ride in the rain unless I really have to, and it's an absolutely filthy day out here today, as you can see. However, needs must and all that. So as far as the Streetfighter V2 is concerned, what's that like in the wet? Well, first off, with all its high-tech gadgetry, it's got you covered from that point of view. I've got it in the wet riding mode, so that calms things down nicely, turns up the ABS, traction control, that sort of thing. So it's got you from a technology point of view. Tyres wise, this particular bike is shod with the Pirelli Rosso 4s, which are appropriate enough for sort of a street tyre, and they are a premium tyre as well, so designed for exactly this sort of bike. And in the time that I've been riding this bike the last couple of weeks, and I've ridden it in all sorts of weathers, I've had no issues with them whatsoever, including on this filthy wet roads as well. So tyres seem fine. The only other thing I guess to note about riding in the rain on the bike is the fact that it doesn't have anything by way of a rear mudguard, just the number plate basically, so be prepared for your back to get a bit wet. But with all those caveats, given it is a naked bike, riding in the wet on the Streetfighter V2 is as you'd expect. It's not great, but it's not terrible either.
Alright, so as promised at the start of the video, what are some of the practical things you might have to come across if you own one of these? Let's start off with pumping up the tyres as usual. First off, beautiful single-sided swing arm on the bike, and I'm really pleased to say that Ducati have fitted those right angle valves, so it's dead easy to pump the tyres up on here. No surprise that there's no centre stand on the V2, so if you're going to oil the chain, which of course you're going to, you're going to have to do it by wheeling it around, put it up on paddock stands or upper stands, that sort of thing. There's a sight glass on this to check the oil rather than a dipstick. And whilst we're talking about the oil, one thing I have noticed is that the oil filler cap is right underneath all this gubbins here, so it's quite difficult to get at, particularly if you compare it with my Panigale, which has got basically the same engine, but it's got like a little an elbow on the banjo joint, so you can actually get the filler quicker, so that's a bit of a pain for maintenance purposes. Horn on this bike, particularly loud, you'll have to take my word for it, but here we go. Alright, seating position then, I'm often asked to show what it's actually like with me on the bike. So here we are, I'm 5'8", my legs can be straight down, feet flat, pretty much on the floor with the bike upright. And then the riding position, quite an acute angle on the leg, which I actually find quite comfortable. And you're leant a little bit forward, but there's no real appreciated weight on the wrist. It's a comfortable seating position. Fuel economy on the bike since I've been riding it, according to the trip, 47.2 miles per gallon, so not too bad, I think. So before we actually ride the bike at night, let's take a look at the lights and the switchgear on here during the daytime so you can see what they're like. So this is the bike just with the ignition switched on. Check out the headlight here. This is like a bright version of the daytime running light. There's a little button up here, look. If I hit this button here, and then we come back, you'll see that it's still on, but it's not quite as bright as it was before. So it's let's just see if I can do that with you watching from the front. There you go, that's off. And that's on, you see, so it's just a sort of a brighter version. Okay, and then the main beams itself, as usual, on this switch here, nice and chunky, easy to get hold of. Again, let me do that so you can actually look at the light. There we go, that's dip lights. That's main beam, dip, main beam, and you've got a flash button there as well if you just want to do a flash. All right, with the magic of YouTube, let's jump on, see what she's actually like at night.
Alright, actually riding in the dark then at night time on the Streetfighter. How does she fare? Well, I have to say, I've ridden a few bikes at night now, and this one is pretty good as far as the headlights are concerned at least. This is on dip beam, and although you won't see it on the GoPro, it is throwing out a nice widespread beam of a reasonable distance away. I can see really nicely. It's one of the better headlights I've ridden with. If I put her onto full beam, there we go, and the spread goes, as you'd expect, a lot further, no problems at all with that lovely LED light on here. Next thing to note, I guess, is that the bike doesn't have lit switch gear. So few do these days, and it's not particularly complicated, the switch gear on the Streetfighter, so it doesn't really matter. Not a big problem, although I don't know why more bikes don't do that, have lit switch gear, that is. And then the other thing to note, I guess, while riding at night is the display. The TFT on here, it's already on a reverse sort of negative setting, as in white on black, so nothing changes there. It is quite bright, but not particularly distracting. It's nice and clear, you can read it clearly, it's got everything you want there, so that's absolutely fine. So as far as riding at night is concerned on the Streetfighter V2, yeah, absolutely fine. Thumbs up for that one. Alrighty, what's the V2 Streetfighter like on faster roads? Well, here I am on a bit of dual carriageway. The fastest roads, these are motorways that you can go on in the UK, 70 mile an hour limit. So here I am doing 70, and yeah, the bike feels absolutely fine. I have of course got a lot of wind coming over my head, as you'd expect, quite a lot of wind noise, it being a naked bike, but it's not a turbulent air, so it's fine in that respect. Plenty more power as well if you want to do a cheeky overtake, but yeah, as you'd expect of a bike like this, absolutely fine on faster roads. Alright, time for the Lying About test. It's a Sunday morning, Great Bissenden train station, the place that I like to simulate moving the bike around in your garage, because there's plenty of space here to do it, and there's marks on the car park of course, so we can see what the turning circle's like. So let's park here slap bang in the middle of one of these standard parking spaces, see what she's like to move around. Finding neutral's fairly easy, turn her off. Alright, there we go, middle of the parking spot there. Let's have a go of moving around then. Feels pretty light to lift off the stand, no problem there. Okay, out we go. Full lock.
And immediately I can see that the turning circle on this quite wide. Here we go, look, we're coming around to the outer edge of this second parking spot. So if I put her there, you can see I went from the middle of that one all the way around there. So turning circle is quite wide on it, but it is quite light and easy to move off the stand and move around. So in terms of living with it from a weight point of view, moving around, lugging it around your garage, that sort of thing, perfectly easy, but it has got quite a wide turning circle.
Alright, what about going away on your holidays and touring with the Streetfighter V2? Well, of course, you can tour with any bike, can't you? You can stick a rucksack on your back and off you go. Hello, sir. And you'd have a lot of fun when you got to your destination on the V2, especially if you're going to the Alps or somewhere. A couple of downsides, though, touring with this bike. First off, the suspension is quite harsh and the seat is quite hard. So, I think many hours in the saddle could become quite tiring. That said, I'm sure you can probably get a comfort seat for it, but yeah, not the most comfortablest perch and ride for long distances, I would say. And then the other thing about touring, of course, is you haven't got any baggage on this bike, so you would have to take a rucksack. No big deal, but might be if you're going away for more than a few days. But handling wise, you'd have a ball on this once you got to where you're going. So yeah, go for a tour on it, but expect to have a bit of a sore bum on the way there.
So at the start of this video, I promised you I'd bring you a complete list of all the pros and cons of the bike, the things that I've found out about the machine over the last couple of weeks that I either love or don't like about the bike. So let's start off with the negatives and get those out of the way. As ever, I've written them down so I don't forget anything. So first up on here, I've said runs hot. This bike, just like my Panigale, absolutely cooks you. Now, that's great if it's winter time here in Blighty, then a warm backside's not a bad thing, but in the summer, that quickly gets old. The way that the exhaust is folded up underneath the seat means that you do get a really warm backside on this. So black mark there. Panigale has always suffered from it in the past, and this V2 is no different. Funny enough, on the V4 Streetfighter, I didn't notice it so much, but this one really does run hot. So that's the first thing. Next up, talking about the seat. The seat on here is hard. It's a comfortable riding position, but the seat itself is pretty hard. I think it needs the comfort seat. I assume there's one you can buy for this. You can certainly get one for the Panigale. I fitted it myself, and it makes a big difference, so I would get the comfort seat if you can. Makes you wonder, what were Ducati thinking when they fitted that one? Was it not a comfortable seat? Anyway, next up, thumpy engine with vibes through the seat, worse than the Panigale, I've said here. So this, yeah, of course, it's a V-twin motor, so you expect it to be, thumpy. That's part of the character of the bike, and we love that. But actually, there are some quite annoying vibes through the seat all the time, I found with this. Again, sorry to keep comparing it to my Panigale, but that has the same engine, so it's a good comparison. I don't find it so much of an issue on that, but on this, all the time I was conscious of the vibes, and that's something that's really put me off the bike, I'm afraid. Next up, not great in traffic, a little bit jerky. You can get the spacers for the throttles on here. I'll put a link to my Panigale spacers video. That would cure that probably, but it's not terrible in traffic. It's a little bit improved over my Panigale, but it's still a little bit jerky, and I think it would benefit from one of those throttle spacers, so check those out if you're in the market for one of these bikes. Next up, that instrument display. There's no excuse for it to vibrate. Here's a little video of it in action.
At various revs, this instrument display vibrates away. I mean, you can always read it, it's nice and clear, but just the fact it's vibrating is not what you'd expect on a premium bike like a Ducati, so that's a little bit disappointing. One for the negatives list.
All right, another thing that I've noted here, which we saw when we did the lugging about test, the terrible turning circle on this. Not a big deal if you've got plenty of room to manoeuvre about, but if you're tight in your garage or whatever, the turning circle might become an issue. And then last but not least, I've said here that the suspension is hard as standard. It is. It does, it'll want to throw you off the bike if you go down a bumpy road, but thankfully it's fully adjustable, so given time and experience, you could dial that out, so maybe not a big issue. All right, that's enough whinging. Let's get on to the positives. All right, to the positives on the bike then, and again, written these down so I don't miss anything. So first thing I've noted here is the bike is not too loud and obnoxious. It does sound nice when you wander up above sort of 6,000, 7,000 RPM. It's got that lovely V2 rumble. But as standard, it's not hideously loud, which I do find, again, with my Panigale could be an issue. You wake the neighbours up with that every time you start it up. Not so much of a problem with this, so that's a good thing. I do think think this bike looks absolutely amazing. The build quality on here is absolutely beautiful. The fit and finish is lovely. It's a lovely piece of kit. The paintwork is deep and lustrous. Just the way everything looks, it's got that specialness about it that I love about Ducati. So yeah, the build quality is great on this bike. Which leads me on to that next point, which is the Ducati feel good factor. I says here, it's just good to be on a Ducati. I've yet to ride a Ducati that doesn't give me a grin. This does put a grin on my face, I have to say. It's a you know, it's a premium piece of kit, and it makes you just feel good riding it and being seen on it. I know it's a bit of a posy thing, but anyway, that's how I feel when I'm riding it. I do think the electronics on this are top quality. They are the latest electronics, so great there if you're into electronics and you like tinkering with your bikes. For me personally, I find electronics sometimes just complicate matters. I'd prefer a simpler setup, but if you love your electronics, you're going to love this because it's got all the latest gizmos and functions on there to play with. Comfy riding position despite the hard seat. I showed you the riding position earlier, and that seat is a bit hard as standard. That can be fixed with a comfort seat, as I said, but the actual riding position itself is nice. You could ride this for hours on end, no problem at all. I said here, excellent quick shifter, and the clutch is nice and light as well. The quick shifter on this is beautiful, both up and down as standard, and the clutch, if you do need to use it, is nice and light as well. And then last but not least on my positive list, and this is something that really is quite important to me, is that it does feel grunty. There's power everywhere. The torque on this is just great on the road, so that engine is nice as a road going unit.
So there we have it. That's my in-depth review of what it's like to actually live with the Streetfighter V2, at least for a couple of weeks. And what's my sort of overall summary? Well, I have to say I'm left with a feeling of being somewhat underwhelmed. I'm a little bit disappointed because I really expected to love this bike, having really loved the V4. The V4 I would have in a heartbeat. It's just easy to ride, smooth, everything about that bike I loved. Whereas this bike, surprisingly to me, has just got too many little things about it that I don't like. The vibes through the seat, the TFT that rocks and rolls too much. Just the nature of this engine when you're riding at slow speeds, it's just not the bike that I thought it was going to be. So for me, it's a thumbs down on the Streetfighter V2. Sorry about that, Ducati UK, you can't love more, can you? But don't be too upset, it's just my opinion. You may love it, so go out and ride one yourself if you fancy getting on the Streetfighter, but no, this bike's not for me, I'm afraid. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed that. If you've not done so already, do consider hitting that subscribe button. It would be great to have you along on the next video. Until then, this has been the Mr. Flyer. Cheerio.
As well as bringing you the lessons I've learnt about the bike. That's rubbish, let's do it again. All right, I said I was going to take you through some of the practical matters. Let's do it again. You're sitting quite upright, you're a little bit leant forward, but there's no great waist on the wrists. There's no great weight. Let's do that again.